Hello everyone. In this video I want to share a teaching on the upcoming new moon solar eclipse in Sagittarius. And I want to start with a song. So I was just thinking of the song a few days ago. I received the first two verses of this song in a dream a few years ago. And I'll give a little context to what this dream was. In the dream, I am traveling with a limp. I'm walking, and I'm with this native elder. We get to this location, we arrive somewhere, and we sing the words, "We give thanks to Great Spirit to carry us through. We give thanks to Great Spirit that carries us through." And I made that into a song and I added some more verses. It's a beautiful teaching. We give thanks to Great Spirit to carry us through. Our gratitude, our thankfulness actually is what moves us through. And we give thanks to Great Spirit that carries us through. Great Spirit is carrying us through. Our source is guiding us, is taking us home. And yet our appreciation, our recognition of it is also what makes it so. There's just some beautiful healing and teachings in just meditating on both of those statements. So here's the song, and then I'll jump into my reflections on this current new moon. Eya, 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 oh, eya, 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 oh, eya, 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 oh. Eya, 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 oh, eya, 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 oh, eya, 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 oh. Give thanks to Great Spirit to carry us through. Eya, 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 oh. We give thanks to Great Spirit that carries us through. Eya, 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 oh. Eya, 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 oh, eya, 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 oh. Eya, 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 oh, eya, 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 oh, eya, 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 oh. And we trust in this moment for all that we need. Eya, 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 oh. Yes, we trust in this moment for being enough. Eya, 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 oh. 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 And we heal one another with the source of our hearts. Eya, 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 oh. Yes, we heal one another with the songs of our hearts. Eya, 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 oh. 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 And we give all our problems to the source of all life. Eya, 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 oh. Yes, we give all the darkness to the source of all light. Eya, 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 oh. Eya, 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 oh. Eya, 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 oh. Eya, 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 oh. Eya, 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 oh. Eya, 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 oh. We give thanks to Great Spirit, to carry us through. Eya, 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 oh. We give thanks to Great Spirit that carries us through. Eya, 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 oh. So one thing that's happening this week is Neptune today, on December 1st, is stationing direct. This Neptune is at 20 degrees Pisces, and this upcoming new moon is actually squaring Neptune. So let's look at the chart and look at the total energetics of what's going on around this new moon. Here we are today, and we can see Neptune right here, 20 Pisces, stationing direct. Let's look at this new moon. We have Vesta in Sagittarius, conjunct the sun. And as we move towards this new moon, just around here, late in the West Coast on December 3rd, for most people in the world, it'll be on December 4th, 12 degrees Sag. There are two things that I want to highlight. One, this is an eclipse because it's conjunct the south node. It's close to the south node. It doesn't even need to be within 10 degrees to be an eclipse. We have Vesta, we have squaring Neptune, we have Jupiter in Aquarius moving towards Pisces, also squaring these nodal points as well. And Jupiter is the ruler of this new moon. When we see a strong cycle opening up in Sagittarius, it points us to our internal orientation, how we are in relationship to the journey of revelation, of growth, of constantly expanding our insight and our understanding of reality. The thing that keeps us from healing, from a deepening of realization and understanding, in part are the convictions that we take with us along the journey. We have too many ideas about where we're going, where we are supposed to go, how we're supposed to get there. We don't allow ourselves to be humble, to learn and to gather new insight. Now, at a time like this, where there's a lot of strong evolutionary energy, we have Venus moving towards Pluto, stationing retrograde soon. So this Pluto-Venus is really focusing a lot of deep psychological content. The upcoming Saturn-Uranus square as well, really bringing deep introspection on how we're living. And this can bring up a lot of fear. So the Sagittarius energy at the core is inviting us to reconnect to the quality of devotion and openness to the fact that we're here to learn. There's more to realize, and to orient our attention in a state of willingness. You know, the Course in Miracles often speaks of the idea that there are essentially two kinds of emotions, love and fear. And we can argue that love isn't even an emotion. Fear itself points to love because fear itself is a denial of love. And thus all fear, if we are to interpret it as such, is actually the invitation for love. It's the calling for love. And so where our interpretation of reality, where our view, our story, our ideas of things engenders a sense of fear, it's actually an opportunity not to get nervous or worried or actually go into fear to embellish the fear. There's an opportunity for each of us, to the extent that we are willing to look at it, that we are willing to explore it, to use that fear as a catapult towards healing. I feel that what's needed is to be honest about the fear. It's not necessary to unravel it and trace it and analyze it and go very deeply into psychoanalysis. We can almost get lost there, especially if we're working on the lateral sphere. Like, this thing scares me because of this, or this early experience, or this person said. These things might be useful, but it can also become an endless trap of trying to work things out in our mind. Rather, to acknowledge and be honest, this is here. And the quality of honesty is not trying to make our experience other than what it is. Not trying to be other than where we are. That's a good journey. We can be on this road, this really powerful pilgrimage. But if we're holding this idea that we should be having a different kind of experience and we're trying to replicate that experience, or we're trying to get to everything we're supposed to go, we'll actually never allow ourselves to have any real, valid, and meaningful experience. The journey always starts with where we are. Now, relative to the square root of Neptune, Neptune says there's peace. There's healing here. And then the truth of reality is always pointing us back towards unification. Unification is not just about these individual parts, right? Your healing, my healing. It's our healing as one. The journey of return is rooted in this intelligence, this consciousness that holds all of its pieces together as one. So your healing and my healing can't even be understood in separate ways. When we work with our trust, when we face the very places where we fear that we can't love now, we can't trust, that we have to close out, when we open up to that and we actually practice orienting our attention to what is true, even if we don't understand it, right? Neptune says anywhere, anyone, any place, the truth is true. We create space for the possibility of a shared healing. Something that's beyond our own understanding, because our limited, fragmented minds will compartmentalize everything, both in our own life, finances, money, business, relationship, health. We categorize, and then we categorize, my problems with you, your struggles with your relationships, my struggles with money, and, whatever it might be. We love to see separate problems that are kind of in their own little categories. The return to love has this miraculous way of bringing everything into clarity. Things that we didn't understand were connected, and because of the fact that all problems are actually the same problem. We think they're different problems because we're identified with them being real. And so to keep them crystallized in the realm of problem, we create a whole box around it, but all problems at the core point to the same confusion of thinking, the same belief in separation, and the same distrust in this present moment, and thus in life, in one another, in ourself, in God, in creation, in Creator. And that's why I feel this song is coming back to me now. We give thanks to Great Spirit to carry us through. We give thanks to Great Spirit that carries us through. We learn to orient our attention to the fact that we are being guided and carried, and that healing doesn't come from our own thinking. We don't think ourselves out of our problems. We don't really know how to heal. We don't really know how to wake up. We don't know how to return back to source. There's a way in which we can't make these things happen in the same way that we want to make, a dinner happen. We can't just logically open up the refrigerator and pull out the ingredients of healing and awakening and suddenly we're happy. We practice orienting our attention to the truth as a practice, as a way of disciplining our minds, bringing it into more and more places where we feel that we can't, right? More and more places where we otherwise draw that invisible line in the sand and say that love can't be here. And again, we have to test everything, not from the perspective of, is it, accurate, is it true, is it right, but does it work? Right? Any perspective on reality is useful only in the sense that it restores love and it brings us into relationship with the source of life that heals, that teaches us, that brings all things into unification. We couldn't possibly do all that on our own. But our thinking, our perspective can be aligned or not aligned. Relative to Sagittarius, that's really the way to think of this. We don't have to find the answer to everything or know how to figure everything out. It really comes back down to, is my way of thinking of this situation, of my life now, is it helpful in restoring a relationship to the love that I am? Or is my need to be right or prove an idea that I have so strong that I care more about that than how I feel? I care more about that than really living in a state of healing and sharing that with everyone. With Jupiter in Aquarius moving to square in the nodes, ruling this new moon, it's actually really, really highlighting the strengthening Jupiter function. And it's potent. It's only 5 degrees actually from, or 6 degrees from an exact square to the nodes, which it'll complete in the next 30 plus days. So this is a time to really look at our sectarian thinking and the ways that we want to keep separate, the ways that we want to settle for alienation, even if it doesn't work. Right? Being right, and how that feels more satisfying than healing. And I often say that we have to let ourselves be wrong. We have to let our fearful ideas reveal itself as being just that. We can't force that. We can't do any of this work in the sort of the shadow Neptunian way, where we're trying to think positively. We can't force gratitude. We can't. It's actually a gesture of faith. Faith and trust is a true gesture of giving ourselves to what we can't prove. We can't hold on to it. We can't even ask it to give us any kind of security ahead of time. I'm constantly learning that surrender and trust and faith is a gesture of giving ourselves to the fact of it before understanding. There's a teaching from the Talmudic teaching that when the Israelites and the Hebrew people traveling in the desert were offered the Torah, they said na'aseh v'nishma, which is we will do and we will listen. And they ask, why did they say we will do and we will listen? Don't you want to listen first before you do? You know, it's a sign of trust. I accept you so completely that I'm going to do it. I'm going to accept this in my life. I'm going to accept upon the responsibility of living in alignment with my source, with the love that I am, before I even believe it or understand it or can fully wrap myself around it entirely. Drawing upon the spark in us that doesn't go away and saying that little willingness is enough. I'm giving my attention to that little flame. And I'm using that as my point of concentration to practice living and being and thinking as the love that I am. Now let's look back at the chart here because we have a very important piece here with Vesta. I actually last spoke about Vesta when Vesta was moving through Virgo. And this is actually throughout much of last year and even through the last months of last year and much of this past year, Vesta was moving retrograde in Virgo. Vesta was squaring the nodes in Sagittarius, Gemini. Vesta was opposing Neptune. And actually recently Vesta has passed the first quarter square to where Vesta retrograded back to when it finished its retrograde in Virgo earlier in this year. Vesta also just passed the South Node. So there are many dynamics here speaking to a first quarter square, South Node, new phase, a new cycle. There's a new journey opening up with Vesta. And now it's going to be moving to square Neptune again. And it's on this new moon eclipse. So the Vesta initiation is strong right now. Vesta is our commitment. It's our devotion. It's the sacred altar that we're lighting and igniting even after there was loss and desecration. Even after there may have been several days, weeks, months, years, or lifetimes of forgetting the holy temple. Right? All altars, all temples are a metaphor for the internal temple. Even the body itself is a metaphor for the inner temple. And there's nothing physical in this world that is the temple, but we can orient our attention and actually light a candle as a symbol of the eternal flame of the soul, right? Our being that is eternally one with its creator, and thus imbued with the power of creation, imbued with the eternal quality and likeness of creator. Our beingness as love, as whole, as sovereign, as free. So lighting the candle and recommitting ourselves. And in Sagittarius, it really speaks to what are the principles of truth? What is our point of devotion that we are drawing upon to practice, right? We're pulling on the arrow. When you pull the arrow, by the way, you open your, right, what's that warrior pose in yoga? It's actual, I can feel it. When I pull that arrow, it opens the heart. There's a courageous quality to saying, I am orienting my attention towards my goal of learning, my goal of realization, my goal of truth, my goal of love, my goal of healing. And it's really neat that this is actually coinciding with Hanukkah. We are in the third day of Hanukkah, which is actually my Hebrew birthday. And I often feel that Vesta astrologically is very resonant with the story of Hanukkah. And by the way, a very interesting teaching on Hanukkah as it relates to astrology. The Hebrew calendar is a lunar calendar. So that means it follows the cycles of the moon. The first of every lunar month is the new moon. And when it's the full moon, it's always going to be the middle of the month, the 15th. Now, Hanukkah always begins on the 25th day of Kislev. And the last few days of Hanukkah are in the month of Teves. Astrologically, every Hebrew calendar has a correlation to a zodiac sign. Because the lunar calendar is not the same as the secular calendar or the tropical zodiac, they don't always align, but in terms of symbology, there's a Kabbalistic correspondence to each Hebrew month and an astrology sign. So the month of Kislev, where the first 5 days of Hanukkah fall, are associated with Sagittarius. And then Teves, where the last 3 days of Hanukkah are associated with Capricorn. So Hanukkah every year kind of encapsulates 5/8 Sagittarius and 3/8 Capricorn, just in terms of the Hebrew months and their astrological correspondence. So there's a really cool teaching in that, especially just when we look at the transits. Lots of strong Capricorn energy. In fact, after this Sagittarius new moon, we're in deep Capricorn world, right? We're getting inspired, devoting ourselves, tuning in. Then we got that Venus Capricorn, Saturn Uranus, Saturn ruling all that Capricorn. Really strong. There are other things too, especially with Neptune and Jupiter really active. But some of the deeper soul level, deeply reflective, revolutionary work is involving many of the Capricorn archetypes in the chart. When we move from Sag to Capricorn, we're having the realization, we're devoting ourselves to, have an understanding, our teachers, our teachings, our practices. We're committing ourselves to the journey of deepening insight and learning, growing. And there's a lot of revelation that happens in Sagittarius. And we have to be honest. We have to be honest with ourselves, honest with the journey, be genuinely authentic and honest seekers of the truth, where we are, with whom we are. And what happens is we have a lot of insight and realizations. In Capricorn, we're asked to crystallize them in our life. To say, okay, now I'm going to commit. I'm going to make choices with respect to these realizations, to these deeper understandings, these deeper insights, to really make them real and fully actualized, not just in the mind. I want them to be the life that I'm living. So we create a structural reality with respect to our deeper realizations. And that takes time and practice and discipline and restructuring of our thinking over a long period of time. So I just think that's a really neat perspective on Hanukkah. And Hanukkah, the word Hanukkah is dedication. It's about rededicating the temple that was desecrated. So in our lives right now, with this Vesta on the new moon, granted all that is yet to come for the rest of this month, what are we rededicating ourselves to? If you light the menorah, if you want to light some candles, or whatever you do to reconnect with the inner altar, the inner temple space, what's the prayer? How are we drawing upon our deepest or deeper commitment and devotion to wake up and to live as the love that we are? And the opportunity right now to face whatever deeper content's arising and go deep, do our practice, really deepen in our inner communion, so we can reframe and reinterpret all as an opportunity for healing and growth, not just for ourselves, but for all of us. And remember that eclipses are portals. So a lot of old energy that's ready to be released can come through, and it can be intense, but if we're orienting to this time with positive intention, it can be very healing. Couple of announcements. We have 2 events back to back. The first is on December 17th, the final class in the retrograde class series, Chiron Retrograde. This will be taught just as Chiron is stationing direct. You can drop into this class and purchase any previous classes. Check it out on my website. We also have on the next day a free intro class to the 2022 Heart and Soul Centered Astrology Training Program. This program launches in February. After this class, I will open enrollment. This will be an opportunity to learn about this training program, how I'm doing it, how I'm teaching it, what this is all about. Anyone who is drawn to evolutionary astrology feels drawn to working with me. This would be a great opportunity to check it out, ask questions, and you might also have the opportunity to hear from existing students from this year's training program. Check that out and all upcoming events in the link below. Okay, much love and thank you for joining me.